they wouldn't know how to, put that into the context of their own lives, probably, unless you articulated it well for them. You see, it's, as you probably know better than I do, because you're a professional teacher, that one's own experiences and one's own knowledge one may have and not have the skill or the ability or the art of conveying that knowledge in a way that's universalized for everybody to use. So basically, to be able to abstract one's own experiences and put it in and frame it without saying I or he, like Shifu or you, is something that is like a generic drug. It's good for everybody. But your personal experiences and my personal experiences, I'm very leery of, I'm very careful. I find it that people don't relate in a way that's beneficial to them. I mean, it's entertaining, no doubt. But I'm not an entertainer. I want to teach the Dharma. And so I think that you gotta, good point. Yeah, so I think that, I think there's different ways. I mean, you can use your own example, but I think in general it's better to steer clear of one's, getting into any particulars, so, I mean, people, whenever I'm asked to lecture, which is only once or twice a year or so in the Buddha Hall, I mean, I'd lecture every day if I had a chance, because I think people should talk and should express themselves and not play tapes and so forth. But, it's always suggested, or especially by people like Hong Shun and stuff, to tell a story. But I rarely tell a story, I find out something that I'm interested in that's helped me in principle, and I generalize it so that anybody in the audience can use it. Now, they may not be as entertained, or they may be more entertained, I think sometimes they're more entertained by that because it's more meaningful, So that story you're talking about, doing the seclusion for one thing, and some of that whole doing the Vietnamese refugee program and stuff. It's very easy to abstract that and talk about it in an abstract way that doesn't mention seclusion, doesn't mention the Vietnamese things. This is service. Seva is important to the Dharma. Seva is a vehicle of mindfulness. Not everyone's built for meditation. A person that practices seva can go as far as anybody else and so forth. So that people don't feel trapped, by the idea that meditation is spiritual practice. Anything is spiritual practice. I think talking about the seclusion, when I said certain things you're probably not going to help too much to talk about, would be the bowing incident with Shifu that we discussed. Talking about going into seclusion and talking about people, how that was and passing the test. That is very encouraging for people. It could be discouraging too, because it also makes it sound like it's out of the reach of a lot of people. So for me, I find it much more beneficial, to speak in more general terms, so that people don't think that, it is, so that you keep everything in people's reach. You're talking to people that barely can sit an hour, and you're talking about 4 years and the benefit you receive from 4 years and all. The tree is very tall and the fruit is very small up on the top there, and it's hard to get at it. So like you want to make it, I don't know, I think what you did is encouraging, but it could be discouraging too. Like I read books all the time about people that are doing, advanced practices in caves and stuff, and I think to myself, I don't even want to read it because I'm not there. It's not even interesting.
Yeah. I will say this one thing also, Richard. Though when I was teaching, I still teach, by the way.
This is of advanced students under great teachers, and I read what the great teachers themselves can do. I'm already past them a long time ago. So it's maybe. I can give you a little bit of a timeline. I don't know how helpful it would be. It goes back to.
Were you doing pranayama when we were together at TM?
I knew how to integrate the breath a little bit with the mantra, but not to the extent I do now. But I still was the mantra I integrated with the breath, but in a way very different than regulation of breath, which is a different story. A different practice. Regulation of breath is pranayama. Using it with the mantra skillfully is a form of awareness of the prana, the subtle breath, while reciting the mantra and trying to merge the two. Or actually, I heard a very good explanation that was in one word, or almost one word, like 3 words or 4 words, of how do you know when your mantra recitation is correct, and the answer was given: if you know you're reciting the mantra, your recitation is not correct. It's so brilliant because it's the shortest explanation of correct mantra recitation that I know of. So for me at TM, usually I would kind of start off reciting the Shurangama mantra, and after about 1 recitation, I didn't even know I was reciting it anymore. And then after a period of time, which may be an hour or 2 hours, I would sense I'm coming out of the mantra, and I would find out, like through the back door, that I'm actually in the right place and all of that, without knowing it before. So. And speaking of the Shurangama, Paul, I just started again. I discovered I'm missing, when I recited, I missed so many lines that about 2 months ago I decided I got to get my act together because I don't want to have people have faith in me that is ill-founded. So I started, like this morning, I spent about an hour writing down sections that I mess up on, where I really don't know how to recite it anymore. And so, thinking about that, I wanted to bring it up that my recitation, my capacity to recite it and absorb into it is not changed too much, but like my capacity to recite it correctly is horrible. So I thought I better get it together. Well taken. That's exactly what Lauren said. She said that she's
Lauren, by the way.
What?
Who is Lauren?
Lauren is the Sanskrit teacher at DRBU, and she's a wonderful person. She's been around for years. But she told me that she said the mantra in Sanskrit is 100% different meaning than the one we have in Chinese. And then I mentioned that to Fred. And Fred said, oh, I'm well aware of that because there's different versions of the mantra. And so Fred was very aware of 4 or 5 different ways of reciting it and different meanings to derive from it. So we're we've been, we're kind of, raised on one version, but Fred when I said that to Fred, he took it as a given. He said, well, that's obvious. There's 4 or 5 versions of the Shrangam, and he was well aware of that. But you know what? It doesn't really matter because you're not supposed to be holding on to the mantra anyway. It's just kind of like a thing that disappears once you use it. So I don't think it really matters, what version you're reciting. Just, it's... and in fact, recently, like we started off with pranayama just a few moments ago, and like I was reciting with the mantra for quite a few years while doing the pranayama, and then one day I was talking to Fred, this was maybe a year ago. I was talking to Fred, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I just dropped the mantra doing the pranayama," and it was to him, it was, of course, you don't recite a mantra when you're doing pranayama. It was like totally. And so recently, relatively recently, because it was sort of an attachment, I abandoned it completely, any recitation. And it was a move forward for sure. Yeah, I would say it moved me forward like, being an odds person, like 20% or something, in one day, in 1 or 2 days. And then another thing that I did, I don't know if this will be helpful at all, but I always use a metronome, because I like to be precise, for one thing, and I don't want to false think that I'm doing what I'm not doing. And so I had a system where, I would do 12 beats per minute on a metronome. So Om Mani Padme Hum is, of course, 6 beats. So if you do 2 beats, if you do 2 Om Mani Padme Hums, then you're doing 1 minute. Then on the exhale, you do another 2 Om Mani Padme Hum, you're doing 2 minutes. So what I discovered recently...
Vocalizing when you're doing this, or are you...
Oh no, I'm deep into my nervous system. So what I discovered was when I decided that it might be better to just focus on the breath, I thought, well, then you don't have to have 12 beats. You could have 4 beats. 1 for the retention at the beginning, 1 for the inhalation, 1 for the retention on the top, and 1 for the retention on the exhale. So it's 4 beats. Each beat is 30 seconds. So it's in a way, it's less distracting, and I'll probably get rid of the beats altogether because most people that know pranayama well, the metronome is sort of a learning thing, but I kind of like it, to tell you the truth. It keeps me more honest, but a couple of times something very interesting happened. What?
So that means you have the inhalation, the retention, the exhalation, and the empty is all equal.
Yeah, I'm not really a practitioner of pranayama because there's so many different ratios. So I'm doing it just from a purely, the most basic ratio is sama pranayama, where everything's even. So I begin with the retention. I don't even think that's correct, but I begin with the correct retention, and then I inhale, then again a retention, exhale, and then a retention. So it's...
That's what the first retention, so did Fred ever explain to you the pranayama that they teach with Yantra Yoga? Because I'm sure Fred practiced it.
Yeah, he and I talked about breath a lot, and he did tell me a little, and he recommended a book by someone. I think I got that book, and I wound up sending it to someone else because I just didn't think it was. I didn't resonate with, but I didn't resonate with Namkhai Norbu. So I spent like 900 to attend a 4-day teaching. I only went to 2 of them, But that's totally irrelevant. The Fabio or whatever his name is that was teaching it, frankly, I already on my own got way past what he's talking about. I looked at the book and I just didn't
But it's interesting what you said about the metronome because the method metronome. You sit and you...
Yeah, but that's good for somebody that's good at that. But like, I find that if I don't have some kind of demarcation, like I'll do maybe a 2-minute hold in the beginning and then maybe a regular on the top, and it gets all really confused. It's not even. Let me put it that way. Like I've done it before when I forgot my didn't forget, but I was somewhere where I didn't have a metronome. The metronome gets in the way a bit because when I didn't have my metronome on a couple of occasions and I did the practice, I go 108 beats, So when I didn't have the metronome, I found that I did far more. And I know what the reason is. And the reason is because I'm very good at being able to hold for long times, like this, I can hold for many minutes, And so like I cannot, for me to do 1 hour of 30 breaths is far more difficult than to do maybe 1 hour of 4 or 5 breaths, because if I'm just going to hold my breath, but I realize that that's not as enlightening or as good for my physical body as it is to do. It's very difficult to do inhale and exhale at a very even pace. Very, very difficult. Like it's much easier to hold for 2 or 3 minutes than it is to inhale very slowly for even a minute.
I can't imagine doing that. So there's a whole schedule of using this method, and I find it helpful, and I find it really, it really clears your mind, and it's, I'm certain that it's really beneficial, this method I'm telling about.
But you know what? You know what, Hung Chi? I'm sure it is. You're used to that. But the kind of pranayama I'm doing, I cannot move. I'm deep into my nervous system. I'm into the inner breath and stuff. Any kind of movement would be a complete distraction. So like I'm trying to get. It takes an hour to do. To go through 108 beads, it takes an hour or so. It's very, it's very, I could not be like touching this or that, once in a while I'll like twist or something, but that's just to release some tension or something. But I could not possibly do the kind of pranayama I do with any movement because it's all inside, totally inside the center of the spine and in the back of the neck, into the brain. All of that I actually go through inside, so like the more I can go into the deeper I can go into the nervous system itself and feel the flow of the channels, the easier it is. It gets to be where it's just ridiculously easy, so that's when I know I'm really connecting and it's really effective. And so there cannot be any kind of movement like to try and at all. It's a different system. There's so many different ways of approaching this.
I just thought you might be interested in it. I wasn't advocating it at all.
Yeah, Fred sent me the book on it, and I went through it, and then I sent it to Mudra. First of all, I don't know anything about the person transmitting it, so like I don't know his personal lifestyle, his anything about him. I do know something about Iyengar, Paramahansa Yogananda, these people with real lineage. So when it comes to breath, Desikakar, Krishnamacharya, these people, they have a whole lineage of breath. So I kind of have read all of their stuff. And then I kind of figured, okay, I got the idea.
I'd like to
at regulating my breath. So, I always try and attend one ceremony a day, and the one of them I often attend is the 1 o'clock Great Compassion, right? So I try and recite with the nuns, the nuns. And I've noticed they're reciting out loud, and for the life of me, sometimes I cannot find, even in a 10-minute recitation, a little gap where they took a breath. And I listen for it, and I try and keep pace with them, and I have to give up and take a breath, but they didn't, So, it's quite it's quite amazing. For me, it's really amazing. I even think, are they aware of how awesome their breath, regulation of breath is,
That's the whole thing about fun. It's really important. It's wonderful.
Well, the way it was explained to me most of the time why you recite out loud is because so many beings come listen to you. All the yogis and stuff, that's what they tell me. The yogis in Dharamsala and stuff that have instructed me, they say when you recite out loud, it attracts people to, hidden beings to listen. So they say you really gain a lot of merit by giving them the opportunity to hear you. So that's the angle that they approach it at. And that's really the Tibetan angle, is that it attracts the spirits and stuff, and they can hear it. So, but I've noticed that when I recite, while audibly, I can go pretty much as deep with the breath and everything as I can when I'm reciting silently. I'll always start with maybe an hour vocally, and then if I feel it's time, I will just go silent, But there's certain things about vocal that's even better, because if you're a little bit scattered, you're going to be more focused if you're doing it aloud and make less mistakes, and I think it's helpful. If I don't feel right and I try and do it silently, I have trouble getting very deep in it, Some days someday I'll start off right. I might start off reciting silently, but then I just break it and say, I know I can go deeper audibly. There's just days like that when you're just not quite as solid, as you should be. At least for me. Good luck teaching people that have come to me and asked me, well, how should I meditate? I don't know anything about it, And I approach it the complete opposite of what the master did. The master had his way, and he wanted us to have our way. I make it very, very simple. I tell people, and I preach that, first of all, you ask, do you have a meditation practice? A lot of times they say yes. And then you ask, do you do it every day at the same time and the same amount of time? Then they usually say no. So then you say, okay. So what you have to do to build a personal practice is you have to meditate every day at the same time and for the same amount of time. Then they want to know how long of the time. Then you say 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes, no more than 15 minutes. Do it every single day at the same time for 15 minutes, but no more. And then you also emphasize that before beginning, always set the stage, so to speak. Offer incense, a candle maybe, put some flowers on the altar, bow 3 times. That takes about 2 or 3 minutes. That doesn't count as part of your 15. Then after that's done and your 15 minutes is done, don't just get up and do stuff. Dudja Rinpoche says, emphasize, you first transfer the merit, which takes a minute. You can just say, may all beings benefit from my practice. Something very simple. Then you bow 3 times, and then you don't immediately go check your phone or whatever, go to the toilet or even anything. You walk outside for 2 or 3 minutes and just without reciting a mantra, doing any of your practice, you just kind of observe, oh, there's a lawnmower, or anything that stands out in your mind that seems, that, oh, there's a person in an unusual shirt, or anything. You label it. And that 3 minutes kind of brings you down to normal. And so the whole thing is that it works. If you tell people like they do here, okay, sit, 1 hour, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. It's like bodybuilding, which I did a lot of. You don't put 400 pounds on your chest and push it off. You start off with 100 pounds and you do 10 reps. Go to the gym for about a month or two and you're doing 125, and after a year or two you might do 400. So the meditation, the mind is the same way. If you tell somebody to meditate an hour or two in the morning, every morning, first of all, they can't do it properly without false thinking. But if you tell somebody, so what will happen in practice is some days they'll feel good and they'll try their hour and maybe even successfully sit for an hour or two, and then they're off for 3 or 4 days because it's too difficult. But if you tell somebody a short period of time, like 10 or 20 minutes, then they actually think, oh, they have confidence, oh, I can do that. And then they're committed to themselves. And then you tell them that, all you have to do, your only job is to show up. You show up for 15 minutes. You sit on that cushion and you just see what you can do, whether it's reciting a mantra, whatever. If they say, I don't know how to meditate, I say, just show up for yourself. Just be there. So, it's surprising how after a while they actually start wanting to add, like someone asked me the other day, can I add a few more minutes? That's the attitude that once it takes root, will take you all the way to the top. But the way they teach here, like these Chan sessions and stuff, I don't think it's productive. You get somebody off the street, they sit for a Chan session, then you ask them 6 months later, are you practicing every day? No. They burn out during the Chan, they hate it. And then they may not say they hate it, but...
I agree. What about the posture? What about the legs?
Oh, yeah, I'm totally... I just say if you can sit in full lotus, sit in full lotus. If you can't, sit in easy posture. If you can't do that, sit in half lotus and then easy posture. And if you really have a bad back or some reason to sit in the chair, sit in the chair. The other posture I teach, I say, if you find yourself dozing, just stand up and finish the session. I used to stand for hours.
If you find yourself dozing, is that what you said?
Yeah, if you find yourself dozing, or you find yourself
or you just too much tension, or you too much pain.
No, not too much pain. I always say to people, well, if too much pain, I don't encourage the pain thing at all. I always teach people the first thing I would teach a complete beginner is.
But I really like the idea. Yeah, stand up and stay there. Stay standing. Finish your sit.
Yeah, finish your sit standing. I don't know if you know, but I used to have a problem with dozing. I'd stand for hours. Shurf used to come in my room and circumambulate me while I was standing many times. Probably more times than I can count. And he used to always have a broad smile if he see me standing there meditating. And I'd stand for long periods of times, So either because I got tired or I just didn't feel the meditation was alive enough, So when I stand, even now, sometimes I stand, but I seldom have any kind of problem with dozing or getting fatigued meditating. So it's pretty rare that I stand, but if I do feel a little off, I will stand. Or if I'm not reciting really well, I'll stand up and say, your mind is drifting too much, stand up. Standing is very good.
So I'm not going to give them a mantra.
No.
If they have a mantra, that's fine, but I'm not going to give them a because this is not supposed to be Buddhist, right? It's supposed to be an introduction to meditation. So I'm going to have them, focus on their breath.
Very good. Took the words out of my mouth. That's the best thing, especially at the beginning. I think it's far better to focus on the breath and label each breath. A good way that I read, and I've done many times, is because it doesn't require a lot of words, is like cold, hot, cold, hot. So like when the air is going in, obviously your nostrils are cool. When the air is going out, they're warm. So it's good to teach that, because invariably they will realize that they're saying warm when the air is going in. And then something taps them on the shoulder and they say, hey, wait, how can it be warm when the air is going in? You lost your mindfulness. So it teaches mindfulness that way. Word and thought, word and breath are very much linked anyway. So you want some kind of marker so that they are not just watching their breath, but they're being held accountable. I challenge his method that he learned from Goenka. Like Goenka, I don't think a lot of people, including Kovilo, understand what Goenka was all about. Goenka was talking to a very broad audience, like Jesus. Like Jesus was talking to a very broad audience. Jesus isn't going to teach this broad audience the yoga and the techniques he knows, the breath mastery and all of that stuff. He's going to teach them, okay, be a good person. Okay, you understand that? Start there. So Goenka, I had no doubt he was a very accomplished person himself, but like if you go to like Kovilo, he continued that practice for years, and he still does it. And I sat here, he interviewed me here and published it on Clear Mountain, and then I invited him. I did another interview here with me interviewing him, but it actually turned out again, him interviewing me. He turned the tables on me. But the bottom line is, like a person like Kovilo that's been doing Goenka for years, I told him, and it's in the video I did with him that he published on Clear Mountain, I say, Kovilo, that ain't happening, because you already got way past that. And then he says, well, what's wrong with it? I said, it's too easy, It's just too friggin' easy, and you're going to have a lot of false thinking, and you're not going to go forward, You're just going to be stuck in this kind of like blasé, watching your breath, mindfulness, and there's no accountability because, I lost my breath for a minute, Whereas if you regulate your breath, and first of all, you can sit all day, 8 hours, watching your breath. You can't sit more than an hour. I can't, regulating my breath. It's just much more of a practice, So I discussed this with Kovilo. If you want to see it, you can see it on there. But we discussed a lot of things. He asked a lot of different questions. He's a great person. He's a personal friend. I met him. After I met him, I invited him for lunch every Tuesday. So he came for like a year every Tuesday for lunch at my place. I would cook for the two of us, and we ate in my garden.
So have you been to Clear Mountain? To the...
No, but I was going to suggest that you go. I haven't gone because I don't live there, but you should go where they are. I don't know. They're very nice people, and you probably get some good ideas from them. But, like to be frank with you, like he's... Damn right he does it. He's a pure monk. He goes out, he doesn't touch money, and he begs for his food every day. He goes out into the public with his big bowl. He's got a bowl like this big, and literally that hangs around his neck. So that part he does really good. And he's really a delightful person. I mean, we're very close personal friends. But he really could go a lot deeper because he's got such a great foundation. And you know what? Sometimes I lament. I say, well, he doesn't know what he's missing out on, because I've suggested who he can go visit in Seattle. That's a great teacher, and he didn't go. There's a very, 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 very good Mahamudra teacher in Seattle. He's not there all the time, but they have the Nalanda Bodhi Institute in Seattle, and the teachers Patro Rimbo, not Patro Rinpoche, that's something like that. Anyway, he's there. When he's there, if you have an opportunity to go get a teaching and just give him a kata, that would be smart, because he's one of the top Kagyu teachers. But anyway, the bottom line is that Goenka, his method is for everybody. And it's not for a person that's been practicing Goenka for like Kovilo for 10 years.
So is your friend a Mahayana Buddhist, or is he a Theravada Buddhist?
Who? Kovilo?
Your friend, the Theravada.
Oh, he's Theravada 100%, and he lived in Thailand in the jungles and all of that.
So he doesn't have any he doesn't have the bodhisattva spirit of practice.
Well, I completely disagree with the stereotype that Theravada gets from the Mahayana practitioners, because it's totally unfair and untrue. But I think that Kovilo has as much as anybody else, and probably a good deal more. I mean, he's there in Seattle to set up an institute for anybody to come and learn meditation. That's public service. I mean, how's that not? This whole label of, boy, that really gets me going when anybody I know you know better, but like so many people.
We have the Saranga Sutra. We have the Abhidhamma Sutra. We have these sutras that they don't have. It's different. I'm not making a judgment at all. I'm just saying, when you have the Saranga Sutra, you practice it in a different way. It's something different. It's a
it's not really that different. It's just a different description. So much of the Dharma is a description. What description works for you that's the one that's best for you. If a Theravada description works best for you, great. If a Mahayana description works best for you, great. If I had to be reborn again, I'd probably be reborn in this world as a Theravada, because they're basically the only ones I know that are really practicing. The Mahayana.
You have to respect that. Yeah, you really do have to respect that.
You have to respect it. Like Kovilo, like when I think, they're going out, whatever's dumped in their bowl, they take, and and they go out and they're barefoot, and except in the wintertime, walking around Seattle, and once they go out once a day before, and they're eating before noon, and they doing it that's not easy, and not handling money and stuff. Like, I see his practice and I think, wow, I really totally admire it. And people talk about the bodhisattva stuff. If you read The Path of Purification, which I have cover to cover, it's like 1,400 pages. The whole Path of Purification of Suddhimagga probably mentions bodhisattva about 100, maybe 500 times, it's just an illusion, this whole distinction. Yeah, we have more sutras. What good does it do us if we don't practice? The Theravadas, they really practice, and they do practice harmlessness and vegetarianism and all of this stuff. Not always vegetarianism, but when beggars can't be choosers. They're beggars, and, you got to get into the spirit of that, I don't think there's a valid Mahayana Theravada decision. The only really criticism I can give of Theravada is they don't embrace the Mahayana texts, because that's the only fault I see where the Mahayana actually excels in, because we do embrace all the Theravada text. So we embrace all of their stuff, but they don't want to have anything to do with ours. So that's a big fault. So you don't believe that these are after any of these Buddhas are true. Well, that's fine. I don't know whether I do either, but I want to know what is said. They're using even if it's an imaginary Buddha that they're talking about and he never existed, that doesn't distract from the whole philosophical and logical basis of the test and what they're trying to describe. I want to know what they're talking about. You know, it doesn't matter if this Buddha is, Manjushri is real or Samantabhadra is real or is false or not. It has nothing to do with anything. What did they say? So Theravada could at least say, well, okay, I don't believe in all of these Buddhas, but what did they say? What does the text say? Because actually, it doesn't matter. That's just a vehicle. You know, what is the essence of what they're talking about? You know, it's a whole philosophical, logical, linguistic beauty of it, you know, that can lift you off. It doesn't matter whether these anything else, you know. So we embrace and we find a foundation in the Theravada. They don't do the same, you know, and I think that's a big oversight of them, of their view.